All right, we'll call to order the,
Recording in progress.
start over again. Call to order the meeting of the Planning Commission for the City of Oregon City, Monday, November 13th, 2023. Staff, call the roll, please.
Commissioner LaSalle,
Present.
Commissioner Staggs,
Here.
Commissioner Laws,
Here.
Commissioner Espy,
Here.
Commissioner West has been excused, Vice Chair Schlagenhofer,
Here.
Chair Stoll.
Here. I'll move on to public comments. Do we have any public comments for items not on the agenda?
No one's online.
Okay. I'll move on to the first item, meeting minute approval for 2023. Has everybody had a chance to review the minutes? Any motions, question, discussion?
They look good to me. I can make a motion to approve the minutes for 2023.
Second.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All right, call the vote, please.
Commissioner LaSalle,
Aye.
Commissioner Staggs,
Aye.
Commissioner Laws,
Aye.
Commissioner Espy,
Aye.
Vice Chair Schlagenhofer,
Aye.
Chair Stoll.
Aye. I'll move on to public hearing for GLUA 21-0029, LAG 23-00001, legislative zoning code text amendment to the multi-use, mixed-use corridor zone district. I'll read the script to start. Public hearing on a legislative application is scheduled for tonight. Our role is to conduct the public hearing and to make decisions about the matter before us. In making those decisions, we must apply the applicable codes and laws and cannot vary from or change those laws or codes. Legislative actions involve the adoption or amendment of the city's land use regulations, comprehensive plan, maps, inventories, and other policy documents that affect the entire city or large portions thereof. Legislative actions which affect land use shall begin with a public hearing before the Planning Commission. A staff report has been prepared for each application and has been made available to the public 7 days before the first public hearing. The staff report identifies the approval criteria that apply to each applicant's proposal. Staff has analyzed the criteria which are contained in the staff report. Upon a recommendation from the Planning Commission on the legislative action, the City Commission shall hold at least one public hearing on the proposal. Any interested party may provide written or oral testimony on the proposal at or prior to the hearing. At the conclusion of the hearing, the City Commission may adopt, modify, or reject the legislative proposal, or it may remand the matter to the Planning Commission for further consideration. If the decision is to adopt at least some form of the proposal and thereby amend the city's land use regulations, comprehensive plan, official zoning maps, or some component of any of these documents, the City Commission decision shall be enacted as an ordinance. Public testimony will be called on in the order it was requested in advance of the meeting. If you have not emailed city staff at planning@orcity.org to request to speak and would like to testify, please raise your virtual or physical hand when I ask if there are others in the audience who would like to participate. For the public record, please begin all testimony stating your name and city of residence. If you would like to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please state your mailing address or email address. Testimony and evidence should be directed toward the applicable approval criteria. If you believe other criteria apply in addition to those addressed in the staff report, identify and discuss those criteria and explain how and why you believe they apply to the application under consideration. Any person may submit written material while the public record is open on each application. Any written materials received by the city staff during the time period in which the record is open will be placed in the record. Written materials submitted during the public hearing must be presented to the city staff in order to become part of the record. If a person intends for PowerPoint presentations, reports, pictures, or other exhibits used in their oral testimony to be placed in the record, copies must be submitted to the city staff while the record is open. If they are not given to staff, they will not be included in the record. Any person wishing a continuance to present additional evidence and testimony or to keep the record open to respond to new evidence must make that request before the public testimony portion of the initial hearing is closed. I'll now ask for conflicts of interest disclosures from any of the planning commissioners. We'll start with Commissioner LaSalle.
I have no ex parte contact except driving by the location and no bias.
Okay, Commissioner Staggs.
I have no ex parte contact or conflict of interest.
Vice Chair Schlagenhofer.
I have no conflicts of interest with this application.
Okay, Commissioner Laws.
I am The only conflicts that I would have possibly is that I'm the neighborhood chair of the neighborhood the application's in, that they presented to our neighborhood association. I didn't have backup for someone to replace me in May of this year in terms of one of the lots, in terms of right next door, in terms of them wanting to expand. I haven't been familiar with all the other lots. And then the final thing is the lot behind, or basically on Warner Milne, facing at the end of Cam Street. I'm still the neighborhood chair, but during a land use appeal with an apartment complex of over 30 units.
Okay, and Commissioner Espy?
No conflicts or bias.
Okay, I have no bias or conflicts of interest. Does anyone in the audience wish to question anyone about their disclosures? No? All right, we'll move on to the staff report.
Thank you and good evening. Chair Stoll, Pete Walter, I'm the planning manager that reviewed this application. Got a short presentation to go along with my report. So this is application GLUA 2129 and legislative application 2301. It's a legislative zoning code amendment to the mixed-use corridor zone district. That is chapter 1729 of the Oregon City Municipal Code. The applicant is PGE, and the zoning code allows legislative amendments to be initiated through an application to the Planning Commission. Procedurally, if the Planning Commission recommends approval of the proposal this evening, and it goes to the City Commission, and the City Commission approves it, the next step for PGE to follow would be the conditional use application and site plan and design review application. So that's an important point to make, and we'll probably be discussing that a little bit more this evening, but there will be further review, and that includes evaluation of a subsequent conditional use permit and site plan and design review. For that reason, staff has not proposed any conditions of approval associated with this amendment at this time. We're just evaluating the text amendment to the zoning code. The conditional use process allows for discretionary review of uses that are not permitted outright within the zone district. The PGE Center is considered a pre-existing use within the mixed-use corridor zone. The conditional use process that follows in the future would allow the Planning Commission to evaluate any impacts from land use or expansion of the facility on things such as jobs or housing and other uses within the mixed-use corridor zone district. And next slide, please. There we go. Thanks. So the PGE Operations Center is located at 209 Warner Milne Road. Currently occupies 2 tax lots that total 6.5 acres almost along the north side of Warner Milne Road, across from the Clackamas County campus and the Beaver Creek Road intersection. As I said, the use of the property is legally non-conforming within the mixed-use corridor district. A public utility facility such as this requires a conditional use permit in order to expand within this zone. The MUC1 zone also prohibits outdoor storage, which is a necessary component of the operations center, and the applicant will provide further description of that need in their report. The properties are zoned mixed-use corridor, and that is regulated under Chapter 1729 of the City Code. Next slide, please. This is a slide that indicates the proposed code amendments. Section 1729.030, conditional uses in the mixed-use corridor 1 and mixed-use corridor 2 zones, allows for public utilities and services, including substations, such as buildings, plants, and other structures. That sentence would be amended to include public utilities and services and utility facilities, including substations such as buildings, plants, and other structures, and outdoor storage associated with the conditional use. In that same chapter, under prohibited uses, subsection 040, the prohibition on outdoor storage would be amended to allow that outdoor storage when associated with a utility facility through a conditional use process. So they're just referring back to that section of code. Next slide, please. The approval criteria for a zoning code text amendment are the same as for a comprehensive plan amendment or a map amendment to the zoning code or map. In this case, the map is not being changed, just the text of the code. Staff has analyzed the proposed code amendment and determined that the approval criteria of OCMC 1768-020 have been met. That includes evaluation of the proposal for compliance with the applicable goals of the Oregon City Comprehensive Plan, which was amended and adopted last year. That public facilities and services that are serving the site are adequate, and that includes water, sewer, storm, transportation, schools, police, and fire protection. They must be capable of supporting the uses allowed by the zone or plan amendment, or they can be made available prior to issuing a certificate of occupancy. In this case, as I mentioned, we're not evaluating a site-specific plan at this point or a conditional use application, and we would be further evaluating compliance with public utility adequacy at the time that that is proposed. The land uses authorized by the proposal must be consistent with the existing or planned function, capacity, and level of service of the transportation system. At this time, there has been no requirement for a transportation analysis, but there would be one in the future. And then finally, that statewide planning goals must be addressed if the city's comprehensive plan doesn't contain specific goals or policies or strategies pertinent to the amendment. We have analyzed all of these through the staff report and determined that those criteria have all been met. In summary, staff agrees that the code amendment is necessary for PGE to meet the needs of the residents and activities of the city. Future improvements to the operations center for power system installation and other needs to serve existing and new development is consistent with the needs of the population growth of Oregon City, and especially with our need to respond to weather events and emergencies of that kind. As you know, recent weather-related incidents such as winter ice storms and the summer heat extremes have really had a toll on the electrical system. And PGE's location is fairly central within the city and is in a good location for that regard in order to respond to those sorts of things. For these reasons and considerations, the proposed code text amendment is consistent with the applicable goals and policies in the comprehensive plan, OC 2040, pertaining to a diverse economy, connected infrastructure, and protected environment. And my staff report goes into detail about that, but I'm not going to go into the specifics unless there are questions about it. The options for the Planning Commission this evening are following your evaluation and discussion. Recommend approval to the City Commission. Recommend approval to the City Commission with revisions or amendments, or recommend denial to the City Commission of the amendment. And if you recommended denial, we would ask you to provide direction to staff for us to revise the findings accordingly so that we can adopt those denial findings at a subsequent Planning Commission continued hearing. That concludes my staff report. And I do have some other visual aids that might be pertinent if you have certain questions about the extent of the mixed-use corridor zone within the city. I have a graphic that indicates that. And I also have the definition for a utility facility, which is in the staff report. But we have two definitions in the code. We have a definition for a public utility, which is fairly broad, and a definition for a utility facility in 1704-1450, which is a lot more specific. Both of those definitions apply to this proposed. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone have any questions for staff? All right, Commissioner LaSalle. Microphone.
What would be stored at that facility?
Currently, PG uses the yard for a variety of outdoor storage uses, including the storage of, and laydown, as it's called, of power poles and utility poles and the wires associated with maintaining the power and infrastructure. So
Would there be any hazardous materials?
I do not know about hazardous materials. I would defer to the applicant about that. Normally, hazardous material storage is something that is regulated by the Department of Environmental Quality and could be evaluated through a conditional use process. Yeah.
Yeah, the only thing I could think of would be maybe transformers, oil-filled transformers and the like.
Yeah, those sorts of things.
You know, I think this is a good plan. The only thing I'm concerned about is changing the code for this one property, which could result in unintended consequences in other properties in the MUC2 located elsewhere. I'm wondering if they couldn't have just asked for a variance or some other appropriate procedure without changing the code. That's my concern.
We had evaluated the possibility of other types of applications to handle this during the pre-application process. There were certain difficulties associated with a variance application and other types of applications, principally because the use of outdoor storage is prohibited in the mixed-use corridor zone. So, knowing that there would be more than one review associated with any expansion of this conditional use, and knowing that the prohibition on outdoor storage was pretty much unilateral and you can't grant a variance to use-related regulations, you can grant variance to things like structure locations, setbacks, height, design review standards, criteria, things that are physical on the site. But actual uses are not something that we typically recommend variances be granted for. Subsequently, that pointed us to direct the applicant to propose a code amendment, which would still refer to the need for a conditional use application because that's a requirement, and site plan and design review as well. And the site-specific application would be part and parcel of a conditional use application in the future. So what I'm trying to say is that you, as the Planning Commission, would still be able to evaluate whether or not a public utility, either in this zone or anywhere else in the mixed-use corridor zone, is appropriate in the location that it's going to be.
That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Commissioner Estes?
Your staff report refers to the facility as a legal legal non-conforming use. So would the zone change take that status away and enable you to?
Once, if a conditional use is granted, it would essentially, it would refer to it as a conditional use.
I'm just trying to add more rationale to doing the zone change as opposed to a variance or other type of action.
It probably would no longer be considered a non-conforming use once a conditional use.
Because I think, right now it's a non-conforming use because they have outdoor storage materials right now, which
Right.
is, did it get approved by a previous CUP or? I know that facility's been there for a long time. So,
Pre-existed the mixed-use
so
corridor
then the zone came in and then there was a prohibition of outdoor storage and now we're allowing that so that
Right.
I would think, that the non-conforming status would go away if we approve the zone change. Does that make sense or?
I think there's more steps between here and there.
Okay.
It's currently a non-conforming use. We changed the code through this text amendment, then PGE comes back and gets a conditional use approval, then the non-conforming use goes away.
All right.
It will stay non-conforming even after this text amendment because the text amendment doesn't do anything until PGE applies pursuant to it.
Yeah. Because I know that non-conforming thing can be kind of a weird hindrance or obstacle in terms of, future expansion or whatever for public need. And so I'm just hoping that.
Right, it gives a conditional use permit for PG would give greater certainty to PGE and to the city about what the long-term parameter is or authorization is for its use.
Great.
Because we don't know right now how much storage they had back in the day when they started and what they stored and where they stored it and all of those sorts of sticky, non-conforming factual questions.
Okay.
All right, any other questions from Commission? Okay, Commissioner Laws?
So since the zoning is going to change here, before, particularly on one of those lots, there's a lot of water that's above ground a bit. And I know that the city years ago allowed ditches to have that water move from one property down Cam Street. What will the city expect from PG&E in the future concerning the ditches? And then also on the previous land use, the city tried to open up Cam Street. Is the city going to still expect those things or?
At this point, it's too early to evaluate. We would certainly, if there's been in terms of the ditch near Cam Street, there was an approved natural resource overlay district application that was specific to the site plan at that time. We would ask for a revised application based on any new site plan from PGE to look at the current condition and quality of that resource. As for the extension of Cam Street, or whether it should be closed, we would have to evaluate that again as well to determine whether the connectivity requirements in the street code or the public facility code are still met. So we were that's something that the Public Works Department looks at during site plan and design review. So we wouldn't just rely on any prior decisions in order to evaluate those. We would look at it anew.
All right, any other, go ahead.
Yeah, just one, one quick thing. So could you just, for everybody in the room, sort of knowledge, explain what in terms of the comprehensive plan, what a mixed-use commercial zone is designed for.
Yeah. The mixed-use corridor zone, I think this would be an appropriate time to bring up the map that I was referring to. It's on the very last slide. It's going to look really small, I warn you now. But, so the mixed-use corridor zone applies along selected areas like 7th Street and Malala Avenue and Beaver Creek Road between Warner, Parrott Road and all the way over to Beaver Creek Shopping Center. It is an urban zone that's supportive of a wide variety of uses, wide variety of permitted residential and commercial uses, and a fairly extensive list of conditional uses, including public utilities as well. It is it's intended to be a transit supportive zone where urban development has ready access to frequent transit. That includes buses and bicycles, and it's intended to be a walkable zone so that new development is built fairly close to the street, and parking and auto-dependent uses are de-emphasized. That's the basic intent of the zone. The reason that public facilities are conditional use in the zone is because they're unlike any of those permitted uses. They're necessary to support the city's infrastructure, and they do have impacts that are unusual compared to the uses that we anticipate.
Just one more thing. In the material, well, in the notice of planning, in the notice that was sent out for this application, there's a map that shows the existing PGE property and then some PGE expansion properties.
Mm-hmm.
Can you just talk about those expansion properties a little bit?
Yeah, the applicant has chosen to show those properties in their application. I believe just to indicate where they are hoping to expand. Should the text amendment be approved, they would seek conditional use approval on those specific parcels. But I would say that planning staff in our report did not really evaluate those site-specific tax lots at this point. That would be something we would want to look at when a conditional use and site plan and review application is applied for.
So there would still be a CUP application
Yeah.
and commission review to
Yeah,
approve that, right?
you would see the full site plan and design review application as well. Yeah.
Commissioner LaSalle?
I still have concerns about hazardous materials. Is there anybody from PGE that would be able to answer a question on that, or?
When they come up, they can speak to that. Yeah.
Okay, because that would be a concern of leakage and sloped property like that, and also what is used for poles to preserve their life. I know it used to be creosote, so I'm sure that's not used anymore, but I am concerned about hazardous materials stored on the property, and that they've gone through the proper procedures through DEQ to cover that issue.
Certainly.
That's all I had.
We would definitely want to work with our Public Works Department, because there's potentially, at the time of site plan design review and conditional use review, we're going to be looking at stormwater impacts as well, and how runoff from the site is managed. And that includes looking at the stormwater quality and how it's treated and that sort of thing. But then specific regulations about hazardous materials or material safety are are very much sort of a state-regulated thing, but we can ask the applicant to elaborate on that.
All right, any other questions? Yeah, okay.
I'll throw something in. I don't have any questions, but when I got the agenda, I didn't completely understand everything I was reading. So I contacted Ms. Herdrovich, and she helped me understand the parts I didn't quite get. And the code changes as written makes sense to me. So that's it.
All right, any other questions? Okay, I had one. As far as we know, and I'm not going to hold anybody to this, but to your knowledge, or to anybody's knowledge, are there any other uses current in the MUC 1 or 2 zone that would meet the definition of utility facility? Are there, in other words, are there any other lots that we're bringing into the fold, so to speak, with this code change?
The last one I recall actually doing an application for was down on 99E, where we have a very small section of MUC where there's a power station. They were proposing an increase in height to some of the poles on that facility. So we did a conditional use and variance application, and I think that was back in 2008. Yeah. As for others nearby, I'm not sure. I'd have to do some research. Yeah.
Okay, and so it's possible then that if we do this code change, they could apply for a conditional use permit for outdoor storage for that property as well, theoretically.
Theoretically,
okay.
Yes.
Okay, all right, that's all I have. All right, we'll call the applicant up, who that is, have 15 minutes. And please introduce yourself, your position, and all that.
I'm Meredith Armstrong. I am the manager of property rights.
Turn on your microphone. Oh, it should be on.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
just got to get close.
Got to get closer. Meredith Armstrong. I am the manager of property rights at PGE.
And I'm a property specialist.
I'm gonna go through. We had a PowerPoint to go through with you guys to give a little overview as to why we're doing this. Okay. We can just go to the, or get us this. So as Pete explained very well, currently the way that we are situated, we are in a non-conforming use, and we discovered that when we were going to try to expand on the site. So we really can't operate in our full capacity without using this expansion. We haven't remodeled the site since 1979, and I think as you guys are all aware, the ice storm really was telling of that we needed to have more space and capacity at this site. So in working with the city and just trying to figure out the best solution for this, we came to just amending the code to allow for outdoor storage in the MUC zone. So this is our current operations center, was built in the 1950s, remodeled in 1979. It has 5 line crews, office staff of 42. It's just really heavily trafficked by our line crews because it's a way to get to a lot of different locations within the area. Right now, as you can see, we have 7 bucket trucks, 4 boom trucks, 1 crane, 1 back truck. That's about all the room we have for that equipment. We have our office space, we have a storeroom, garage space, and then some covered parking. Really, this is just not enough room for us. We have struggled to work within this space, and then when we initially were moving forward with expanding, we discovered that we were actually a non-conforming use. So we had to kind of step back and take a look at how we could move forward from that problem. Because another thing with our pole storage on our site, we have to have outdoor storage. It's really just not feasible to have it indoors, and to be able to manage and get around. And so that is what we're dealing with now. We could go to the next slide. So basically, the reason why we're really feeling that this expansion is important, big thing is the emergency response readiness. We found in the ice storm that we had the hardest time getting this area back up and connected, and that was because we didn't have the space and the ability to respond quickly because we were moving to different sites to pick up the things that we needed to then come back to this site, and navigating that was very difficult. And as I think we're all doing, we're looking at how we can be more resilient. And so that was what we identified at this site, is that this will allow us to not only respond to these immediate disasters, but also to be more resilient in the future. We've also seen a lot of growth in this area, and the customer growth has definitely gone up. And so we need to be able to meet that demand, and then just be a safer with having better access on Warner Milne and providing a better and a safer site. So this is showing kind of our current site and then where we would like to expand to. PG has acquired the properties that you see here in the yellow. We have our current site and then the expansion. Those are all MUC zoned sites, and it would take us from our current about 6.8 acres to up to 12 acres, which would give us the space that we need to be able to revamp the actual office building itself, and then also create more storage, more parking, more just ability to move around the site and put what we need on it. So I heard a question about the transformers and poles. So you'll know most of our poles now are ductile iron. We do still have the wooden poles, and then we do have transformers. However, when we do any storage, we will follow all DEQ requirements. Any sort of transformers are put in particular storage spaces so that the runoff does not become a concern and they don't just run off directly onto the site. So they are in their own contained space. But we do follow all environmental compliance and all regulations that we would need to make sure that we weren't having any runoff that we should not.
All right,
That's
it, all right.
That's our basic ask. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. We basically just need more room on the site, and part of that room has to be outdoor storage in order to be able to make our expansion work.
Okay, thank you. So next, I'll ask if there are any representatives, recognized neighborhood association, government agency, or other incorporated public interest organization that would like to testify.
Chair?
Yes.
Are we going to do questions?
Oh, I'm sorry. Jeez, you're right. Yeah, it's been a while. Yes, please, questions. I'll forget everything I just said.
Okay.
Yeah, my apologies.
I'll start off with a question. So is this still an ideal site for PGE to service this area?
We have looked at other sites. We have looked at a variety of different options. We first started looking when we realized that this was, even before a non-conforming use, to just see what really makes sense. The access and the location of this site is very ideal. The ability to serve locations that, and it's not, because we have our Gresham site, we have other sites, but this site itself is ideally situated especially with weather events, in the ability to get places that you can't get to this site if you don't have it there already. So yes, it's definitely, and then also being close to Public Works and being able to kind of work with the city when those things happen is also another huge benefit.
Commissioner LaSalle?
Would this generate any additional employees?
The intention of when we're upgrading our office building too is to add some more capacity to it so that we can co-locate some of our admin or like our engineering support that supports more of this area. So there's definitely a possibility that we will increase the employees at this site.
Vice Chair Schlagenhofer?
I think my question is more for staff than it is for the applicant. This is the legislative part of the process. How deep do we dig into the changes that they're proposing and then the future uses of the land? And how much should we be digging into just the legislative part? Because we're not really looking at their plan yet. Haven't seen their plan. So do we just look at the legislative changes and then we'll deal with all the complex parts later?
That is correct. You are being tasked with a text amendment to evaluate whether or not this text amendment is consistent with the comprehensive plan and the statewide planning goals. That's it. I think that PG is offering this additional background so that you can understand why they're making the ask.
Yeah.
But I don't think how they're going to expand is germane to the text amendment ask here.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, most of our other legislative hearings haven't been tied to a specific project in the past, and so it's
Well, and they're usually not,
convoluted for us.
an applicant pursued.
Right.
And, this is sort of super tiny and nuanced, so, and we don't expect that it will have far-reaching effects. I mean, we don't really know of any right now other than PG, but there could be one someday.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions, commissioners? Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now, any representatives of a recognized neighborhood association, government agency, or other incorporated public interest organization? No? Any public testimony from individuals? No? All right. You're welcome to come up for a rebuttal if you want to add anything else. This is your time again, if you like. No? All right. Okay, so yeah, we can move on to discussion or a motion or pleasure of the commission.
Close the public hearing.
I move that we approve GLUA 2100-029, LEG 2300-001, legislative zoning code text amendment to the MUC mixed-use corridor zone district.
I second.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion?
It's a recommendation.
All right.
I'd like to discuss a
Right.
couple things.
Sure.
Just a clarification, you're
Yes.
recommending approval to the city commission.
Approval to the city commission. Okay.
I think it's interesting when you look at the mixed-use map, of where we currently have our mixed-use zones in the city. And if you look at the expansion plans for this, it's going to take up it's going to take up a very large portion of the mixed-use zone on that street. And I know right now we're just considering the text amendment to allow outdoor storage. And we'll see their application later for the expansion. But I think it's worth noting that it's a large, that's why I asked the question, is this still the ideal location for your facilities? Because the mixed use zone is not really meant for this kind of use. So I just thought that'd be good for us to know that, understand that.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? No? All right. Call the vote, please.
Commissioner LaSalle?
Aye.
Commissioner Staggs?
Aye.
Commissioner Laws?
Aye.
Commissioner Espy?
Aye.
Vice Chair Schlagenhofer?
Aye.
Chair Stoll?
Aye. And motion carries. All right.
Notice you're going to say when this is going to be considered by the city commission.
Move on to communications. Any communications from staff?
Not much at this time. Right now, we don't have any agenda items for the second meeting in November. I believe we do have agenda items for our December meeting. I think our second December meeting is during the holidays, so we'll just have one in December. And I believe I forgot to bring my agenda planner with me, but I believe it's another legislative amendment. This time it's coming from staff, so not as nuanced, but.
All right, sounds good, thank you. Any commissioners have any communications? No? All right, oh, yes.
Just one thing. So in a recent email from Christina on the planning staff, we got a notification about the McLaughlin Boulevard enhancements, kind of project overview. I don't know if the other commissioners saw that or not, but there's some plans to look at McLaughlin Boulevard, you know, down by the river. And the question I just had a question about the Planning Commission's participation in that. And I looked at the calendar and, you know, I see there's a formal Planning Commission public hearing like late next year. But how's the Planning Commission going to participate in that process?
I believe you were, I can't remember if you were here at the last meeting that they presented at, but so Christina and Dana will come back. Dana Webb, our city engineer, and Christina is from the planning side, and they'll basically present information, and we're happy to take feedback, but there really isn't a role for the Planning Commission like there was with, say, OC 2040, where you were heavily involved in kind of crafting that. So really, you're just getting updates and getting information about where you can give your own kind of personal feedback on the project. However, it eventually will get adopted as part, I think it's as part of the transportation system plan. I think it will be coming through as a comprehensive plan update in that format, a TSP update. So that's why there's an actual, a formal adoption, public hearing later in the process. So right now, they're just kind of going through the alternatives analysis and getting feedback. And then once that gets dialed in and an alternative is settled on, that'll come back through for a comprehensive plan amendment.
I'm really glad that we're looking at that because, yeah, for a bunch of reasons. That whole stretch there of Highway 99 along the river is, I think, is one of the most valuable portions of the city. And right now it's just a road and there's nothing special about it. So I'm glad we're doing something with that.
Yeah, definitely, provide your feedback on I think that there's going to be basically a virtual open house online. So they should be showing the alternatives. So yeah, take a look and provide your feedback on that.
All right, Commissioner LaSalle.
Our last CIC meeting, Christina gave us a very good presentation on that subject. So you might look at the meeting of the CIC from last week.
Okay. All right, any other communications? No? All right, we're adjourned.